The sagittal cogs are movements that we're going to explore where there's action forward and backwards. Sagittal action typically refers to a tilting forward or back of the rib cage, the skull, the pelvis, maybe even some of the foot bones. And then when we talk about the hips and shoulders, sagittal action is all about extension and flexion, this forward motion. So, when we're doing the sagittal cogs, we're going to start by trying to pay attention to the pelvis itself. Consider it like a bowl of milk, where you have that bowl, when it's nice and level, the milk is almost at the rim and it's not going to spill out. Now, if I were to do an anterior or forward tilt, the front of the bowl, right under my belly button, would begin to tilt downward. The backside would begin to lift up, and the milk would pour out my belly button. If I were to go in the opposite direction, from neutral or balanced position, and begin tilting the backside down, the front side would lift up while my thumbs drop down, and the milk would, say, pour out my tailbone. This is the action we're looking for in the sagittal cogs. Starting with the pelvis, just get a sense of what is it like to tilt the pelvis forward and tilt the pelvis back. Is there a difference between the two? And imagine that the pelvis is a bowl balanced on top of a pole, and that pole is trying to stay pretty still. So the tilt is purely forward and backward without the pole or your thighs bending and straightening. Can you just create this tilting action while your legs stay straight for the time being? Now, as you tilt this back and forth, can you get a sense of action feeding up into your rib cage? When you tilt the pelvis forward, your ribs would be sent forward through the spine unless you did something else to maintain a balanced point. And that is to tilt the ribs in the opposite direction, backwards. So can we get a sense of what that's like with a forward tilt and a backward tilt? Anterior, posterior. Does your head stay in one place above the rib cage? And does your rib cage stay above the pelvis? You can see in the background that the board right in front of my body is not being broken. I'm not letting my head or my ribs or pelvis drive in front of that line. So it might be something good to use a mirror perhaps in the future to see if these movements are for you. Now, there is a bony part of your pelvis called the pubic bone, and then there's the xiphoid process. If you've ever taken a CPR class, you probably know what that is. It's the very tip at the bottom of your sternum, or manubrium, right there in the front of your rib cage here. You're going to try and bring these 2 points together, or at least closer. They don't have to touch. And then you're going to cause them to move away from each other. Can you do this action still maintaining a stacked position with your posture? What is that like? Are you able to flex into the spine and extend? Do you notice that only the pelvis is moving and the ribs are not doing much? Or are the ribs doing everything and the pelvis is not moving? Can you get them to move simultaneously in a cooperative way? Now, the head itself wants to maintain a nice level posture while everything else is moving underneath it. Kind of like a duck on water. The feet are moving fast and furious below the surface, but you wouldn't know it from looking up above. The head is always trying to stay locked on the horizon. So as we move through these cog actions, we'll explore what it's really doing to the head. So if I'm flexing my spine and I were to just freeze this position and straighten out the body, you'd see my head is actually tilted back. In the same direction my pelvis is tilting. And when the pelvis tilts forward, the ribs tilt back and the head stays level. If I were to straighten this out, we would see my head tilting forward as well. It is tilting forward and tilting back with these motions, but the body moving underneath it causes the head to stay level. Now, what does it mean for the legs? Well, as I do my anterior tilt, I want to have my knees begin to bend. Some rib cage tilting up and back, pelvis tilting forward, and knees going into a flex position, which causes my ankles to go into a flex position, and the knees travel slightly inward to flatten out those arches of my feet. And the opposite occurs when I go into a posterior tilt. The knees begin to extend, the arches begin to lift. You may feel weight more toward the outside of the feet and into the heels. Can you get a sensation of that? What is that like? Do you struggle with one motion? Can you work through it? This is just another way of integrating proper joint mechanics and biomechanics into your body, something that may be missing a little bit here and there. So do be sure to assess, then move, then reassess, just like all the others, to make sure, is this what you need at this time? There shouldn't be necessarily any pain with this. Pain is your body's way of telling you, I'm not probably doing this the right way. Maybe slow it down, check out how it is you're moving. Maybe cleaning up the movement will actually let that pain sensation drift off. But if it does continue, maybe this just isn't the one for you at this time.